Welcome to Mindshock True Crime. This is your host, Bruce McGuire. You are listening to the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders case. This is episode 3. Other suspects. And we do need to go over other suspects. In the previous episode, we went over quite a few individuals that were alleged to have been involved in this crime. Not Gene Leroy Hart of dubious evidence. Of course, there's fingerprints that don't match him. There's a footprint several sizes too small. There's his history with the significant other or former significant other of the sheriff. So the sheriff only wanted Gene Leroy Hart, didn't look elsewhere. Despite many other leads and many other witnesses, including in the camp that night, we will be going over mind-shocking testimony that has not been seen anywhere else on any other podcast. Because this is Mindshock, and we go down every single rabbit hole in every single case, attempting to upturn every stone in the name of logic and reason and justice for the victims. As always, if you enjoyed the Mindshock podcast, find it interesting and informative, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that bell for notifications. You can also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube for access to exclusive streams and chats. Like and share the podcast, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons do have priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcast, or requests. You could also be a guest in the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. Alright, so let's jump right in here with this post regarding Jimmy Bryan, of course. Make sure you check out the first 2 episodes. So, very recently, so I'm getting this from Tappa Talk, and I'll go over the Jimmy Bryan issue briefly because there's a new post here just a few weeks ago. So this was, of course, originally there was a segment here on the KJRH TV's 1990 coverage of the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders. And Jimmy Bryan was, of course, murdered, supposedly marijuana, but his father believed it had something to do with the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders. So a couple of articles here. Tahlequah Daily Press, 2 convicted murderers up for parole. And this is June 13th, 2011. 2 men serving life terms on first-degree murder convictions from Cherokee County will be among those considered for parole later this month when the Oklahoma Pardon and Parole Board meets in Oklahoma City. Wesley J. Duffield and David L. Heiler are listed on a docket available on the board's website, ppb.state.ok.us. The board meets June 21st to 24th at Hillside Community Correction Center. Duffield was charged in 1977 and started his life sentence February 27, 1978. Records available online show he was convicted of the July 1977 death of Jimmy Dean Bryan. Heiler was charged in 77 and started his life sentence February 27, 1978. Records available online, okay. Heiler was charged in 1986 and has been in prison since July 29, 1987 for the September 9, 1986 shooting of Mark Owen Richardson. He appealed his conviction and it was affirmed by Court of Criminal Appeals August 1990. Jerry C. Pace, serving 10 years, with the last 8 years suspended on a 2009 indecent exposure case, and Hurley D. Pitts, serving 10 years, with the last half suspended on a possession of controlled drug with intent to distribute case, also on the docket. So, Duffield is 5'10", 136 pounds, blonde hair, hazel eyes. Murder in the first. And then, so that is Wesley Duffield. And then there's also Jesse Duffield, his brother, who's a sex offender, and he is listed on MuskegeePhoenix.com. Sex offender compliance checks find few astray. Interesting. So, yeah, that's kind of weird. So, apparently, So some posts here. If I am deciphering this correctly, it appears that Wesley Duffield and his father led the officers to where the skeletal remains of Jimmy Bryan were located. The officers later searched for Jesse Darrell Duffield, who held a gun on the officers. After being ordered to put the gun down, Jesse Duffield dropped the gun and he was not charged with this offense. His brother, Wesley, pled no contest to Jimmy Bryan's murder, and this ended the investigation. I don't really like topics for any discussion on any case, but too many people post to have nothing better to do with their time. However, the Duffield brothers are brought up on not just murdering Jimmy Bryan, but being involved in the Girl Scout murders along with Jimmy Bryan. And this was on the Locust Grove topics. Again, based on the Jimmy Dean Bryan's father, and further posts here. So Jimmy Bryan was 17 in 1977, Wesley Duffield was 23, and his brother Jesse was 20 in 1977. So Jimmy's dad talks about it on the video. One of the boys knowing one of the girls at Camp Scott, one of the girls who were murdered, or one of the counselors, or a camper. I'm going to assume probably one of the teen counselors or teen campers. Could it be possible these three guys did the murders? Jimmy was going to talk, so they killed him. Also, I wonder what newspaper Jimmy Bryan's murder was in. In the video, there's no reference to what newspaper it was taken from. As for Jimmy's dad, who was in the video, he died in 2002. The mother died in 1988, and both his brothers died in 2011 and 2012. So I guess no one can ask them any questions or see the newspaper article they had of Jimmy's death. It leaves many questions as of why these guys would have been around Locust Grove at the time and how well they might have known the layout of Camp Scott. It is interesting that Jesse Duffield was convicted in 1999 for rape with an instrument, knowing that a possible instrument was used to rape the three girls at Camp Scott. Okay, the other weird thing is, again, even if it's not these guys, if one of the camp counselors, these teenage girls, if they had a boyfriend, is it outside the realm of possibility that he was sneaking on or about the camp for whatever reason, however many times in the past? So there are a few articles here. So Duffield's father committed suicide. So this is Lawton Morning Press, September 3rd, 1977. A preliminary hearing for Wesley Gene Duffield, whose father apparently committed suicide rather than testify against his son, was continued Friday after one witness appeared. And you know what's weird, though? So that's Wesley, but Jesse also held the gun on officers when they came for him. I mean, and they weren't even really after him, so I guess Wesley took the fall, and that's it. Because according to Jimmy Dean Bryan's father, all three were involved. But anyway, continuing here, father apparently committed suicide. Curious. Rather than testify against his son, was continued Friday after one witness appeared. Duffield, 23, is charged with first-degree murder in the slaying of Jimmy Bryan, 18, in July. His father, so again, some of these might be 1 year off here from some people are reporting. His father, Jesse Pete Duffield, had led county officials to the body of the Bryan youth, or Ute, as Joe Pesci would say, after telling them he believed his son had killed Bryan. The father had been scheduled to testify in the preliminary hearing. The father was found Thursday shot once in the chest with a .30 cal rifle. In the chest with a rifle? Is that suicide? That's kind of weird. The father was, what? Officers said he apparently had committed suicide. The only witness at the hearing Friday was an official from the state medical examiner's office. Bryan disappeared July 7th shortly after the younger Duffield accused him of stealing 2 pounds of marijuana from him. according to witnesses. Brian's younger brother, Bobby, 16, testified earlier that Wesley Duffield had threatened to kill Jimmy Bryan if he did not come up with 2 pounds of pot or $260. Another article here from Ada Evening News, Friday, August 5th, 1977. Wesley Duffield, 23, Tahlequah, has been charged with first-degree murder here in the shooting death of Jimmy Bryan, 16, also of Tahlequah. Wow, his age is all over the place. Duffield was arrested Wednesday after his father told officers where to find Bryan's body, who had been missing since July 11th. Bryan had been shot twice in the head. Twice. Wow, double tap. Is that more of a professional hit? This is weird. I mean, all I could say is this is weird. So, Jimmy Bryant's cousin apparently has posted on social media. Here's a post here. Hello, recently, just a few weeks ago, is this post. Hello, my name is Terrell White, and I'm a cousin of Jimmy Bryant's. Jimmy was the son of my mother's sister. I was born in 1978, so this was right before my time, but I've heard about this my entire life. I only am posting what I've heard and do not know what to believe. This is just being posted as part of the bigger picture. The rumor is that my mother's youngest brother, Johnny Rotramel, Jimmy, Wesley Duffield, and Jesse Duffield were all at Barren Fork Creek east of Tahlequah one night shortly after the Girl Scout murders. And apparently my uncle heard the Duffield boys confess to the murders, and they implied in their conversations that Jimmy was either there when it happened or knew of their involvement. So he might have not been involved directly. A week or so later, my cousin was murdered. So is this the case of Jimmy just was around them when they were bragging or talking about it, and then he threatened to turn them in, and that's why they killed him, and he wasn't a direct participant? I mean, there's a lot of broken telephone here. It was determined that Jimmy was murdered over a pot deal gone bad. There was never any doubt that Jimmy was involved with marijuana, and his own parents knew that. However, Jimmy's father, Travis, remembers the Duffields being over at their house one night. My entire family grew up around the Duffield family, although the boys had lived in the Bartlesville area for several years. And he remembered seeing one of the boys wearing safari boots with odd-looking soles, which looked like the shoe prints that are seen on the tent floors. He also made a connection with their fascination with caves and how the killer seemed to be living in a cave in the area of the camp. Okay, so apparently the Duffields are also obsessed with caves in the area. Interesting. My Uncle Johnny was interviewed by Cherokee County Sheriff, the neighboring county to Mays, where Locust Grove, in the early 90s regarding his interactions with the Duffields that night. My Uncle Travis did tell the story with Jerry Weber on KJRH around that time as well. Nothing ever came of it. Here's the deal, though. My Uncle Travis was a very level-headed person and a local minister. For him to get on TV and say that he honestly believed his son maybe have been involved in the murders was big. Trust me, in this area, you'd much rather admit that your son was killed over a bad drug deal than for being involved in killing 3 innocent girls. I mean, that's a great point. I mean, what's his motivation for lying here if he's lying? I mean, there's really no upside unless he's just a man of integrity and he wants justice for these victims, even if his son was involved. Both of my uncles have passed away now. Wesley Duffield died last year. To my knowledge, there was no known connection between the boys and Jean Leroy Hart. So some other online sleuths on the Girl Scout Murders Cold Case Research Group on Facebook also dug up that the Duffield brothers were involved in burglaries with their own father. So some people allege that they also burglarized this camp. And as we went over in the previous episode, apparently there was a lot of people either stalking about, burglarizing, vandalizing, possibly killing animals. I mean, it's just for years at Camp Scott. So, I mean, is that all unrelated? I mean, it's kind of hard to say that it's all completely unrelated. So here's another post, Tappa Talk here. Again, this could have been taken from other forums, but this was relatively new as well. Last July 29th, 2021. Seeking some clarification in the hearing transcripts and case from those who studied the case longer than myself. I'm new to the forum and frankly new to the case in general. As a dad of 3 girls, I randomly caught a video not long ago detailing Camp Scott today and the infamous murders. Like most here, when you hear about it, and especially the more you get into the details, it sticks with you. Again, as a father to 3 little girls, it is haunting, really. Anyway, been reading a lot, and especially the transcripts of the hearing had me questioning a lot. Thought some on here might offer their thoughts on those. I know it can be some time before replies, so I threw out my entire block of questions. Sorry for the mess. First, reading Carla's questioning. It isn't clear at first that when she found the first body, that she told the other 2 counselors what she found. I think one remembers her saying body, and Carla seems to say she said something in the road, but later states that she told them of the bodies, plural. Regardless, was it shock or was she trying to protect Dee, Susan, other campers even, from knowing that she doesn't more or less stress that the girl is hurt, or likely worse, as they begin to count the kids? During her last check-in, the one from 1 to 1:30, in which she hears the noise and giggles in 10 to 4, when she walks to the spot, shines on the bushes across the road into the other property, the noise stopped. Is this the same path the bodies are found in the morning? And how creepy is that, too? Because the perpetrator or perpetrators might have been right there when she's doing the check. And then she leaves, and then they do the crime. I saw one outside reference was this behind tent 1 and 2, but Carla doesn't state this clearly, trying to place the noise area. Susan talks about the towel that is discussed so much being hers. They ask a lot about this towel used to dry feet off, where it was, and access to it. It is also established that the girls notice blood on it later, and it is taken for evidence. What am I missing about the importance of the towel? Do they think it was used to wipe up the blood in tent 7 and then put back? Along those lines, why do they think the killer bothered to wipe up the blood, actually? I assume the mattress covers were taken and used to wipe up the blood, but they are not mentioned, really. Did they ever find those? In the Barb Day elements, I've read various accounts of the note left in camp before the murders about plans to hurt girls. Some conflicting elements say that was found to be a hoax, but Barb Day mentions it in the hearing as real, found by Michelle Hoffman. Did they not know it was fake at the time, or was the note really found? I believe in her words. They also bring up the glasses being found. I think these are the ones Carla reported missing along with her capo. In what area were these found, or did I mix something up and these were what were found off-site? I want to know if those were found in the area where the girls were found. The ranger testified that the incident where a tent was torn was that of a door flap being cut off, but elsewhere one of the girls mentions a smaller piece torn, 4 to 6 inches or something. Are these 2 incidents that occurred to the tents prior to the girls arriving, or one? Big difference if an entire door flap was cut off. Now some general questions. The noise. Carla and Dee heard the noise based on her words, although Dee doesn't mention it apparently. The way they describe it, it doesn't sound like an animal. This was when she was hushing tent 4 giggling. Did any of those girls ever report hearing the noises or other kinds? There was an outside report that one of the tents, might have been 6, had a light flash into the tent, revealing the profile of a man in the doorway before exiting. Where is this documented at, and more importantly, is there a time estimated when this occurred? It is also apparently mentioned that Hart made some kind of a noise while he was assaulting the two women for which he was convicted. Was there ever any type of comparison of those noises descriptions made? The thought of that, if guilty, Hart had some kind of sick MO noise when committing the crimes, and if the noise came from the rough area direction the bodies were found in the time frame of estimated death. Likewise, another report mentions a Comanche, south of Kiowa, counselor, seeing a red light heading toward the Kiowa direction around 8 to 10 p.m. Is this hearsay, or is this a specific person on record saying they saw this? And that's curious because that's several hours before the alleged crimes occurred. So, before the crimes allegedly occurred, we don't have an exact time, of course, but I mean, this would put the potential perpetrators in the area for hours, unless we're going with the theory that there were Boy Scout kids from the Boy Scout camp that were just coming to play pranks or whatever, and they're not the murderers, but they were there as well. Some of my thoughts were trying to look at the situation overall in a geographic setting and a few observations. First, it seems clear that the camp was being watched and walked by someone for quite a while. Just in my basic readings of the listed accounts, we have a 1976 intruder going into a tent with 3 women, Ranger testimony. An earlier 1977 raid in the pantry stealing flour, and the pre-camp thefts when the note was found or wasn't occurred. Carla mentioned a scary incident in the staff building where she clearly hears steps of someone during orientation and a possible door flap being cut off. Someone was in the camp, and 2 things stand out. While it could be multiple people, it seems pretty consistent, such that these happenings would be more likely to be committed by someone in the area who keeps coming back. The other thing geographically is these all and the killings are happening in the southern area of the camp. Intruder was in the Quapaw unit, Greater Hall food raid, food stolen, staff building noises and theft, and the Kiowa tent cuts. Hard for me to tell, but this would be the furthest from a highway, correct? Question mark. It's no shock that, to me, these fit Hart's situation pretty convincingly with knowledge of the area, known proximity, and need for food. Not to mention who would remain in the area doing this kind of stuff for such a continued stretch of time. To presume guilt, also the intrusion of the women's tent and testing of tent flap strength by cutting a piece off before campers arrive. We knew from the flashlight setup that the killer took steps to conceal and plan. Seems like it would be good to know how loud or hard it would be to cut into a tent. And that is how the killer got in, correct? Question mark. A large cut in the back of the tent. In the cave nearest to the area, the one closest to the camp in the south, nearest to the ranch, what, if anything, was found there? I get a bit mixed up on what was found in which cave. And rightfully so. I think there was 3 different caves. Again, using only the hearing information and looking over the maps, my novice brain puts the following timeline together. Hart knows the area, and specifically seems to target deeds in the camp stemming from the southern borders, an area in my mind he stacked out continuously while hiding, let alone as a kid growing up in the area. Either for boredom or food thefts, he snuck in the park several times before, even going so far as to try something on the women's tent in 1976. He knows the land to be able to get in and out at will. After the failed intrusion, he plans another attack in a more exposed unit and on an easier target. On the night of the attack, he uses the southern route. Need to see the topology if there is a natural element that helps him evade sight. His light is seen from Comanche moving in the woods around 8 to 10 p.m. He stacks the area, but wanted to hit Kiowa from his casing before camp. Tent cut Carla Prowler. When the girls had cookies with the counselors before bed, I propose that is when Hart stole Carla's items. Fascination with glasses being a real element to this guy, it seems. D does last check on every child at 10:30. Hart makes moves to pick final tent target. Midnight, Carla gets up to quiet the girls again. I think he strikes around 1 a.m. Blows to the 2 younger girls, and he takes Denise. Moves to area in the brush across the road and the gate to assault Milner. At 1:30, Carla and Dee get up to giggling girls suddenly, but also hear him noise. Psycho can't control himself with noise until flashlight shines on him, silencing him, but a scared Carla doesn't go to investigate, and girls and her go to bed. Hart moves back to tent 7 to move the other two girls, placing in sleeping bags and or using mattresses to easier move them. At tent 7, potentially wiping up blood to remove shoe prints, he is using flashlight, and this is when the dim light is witnessed. Outside report, I can't find reference details, around 2 a.m. Also during this element, maybe it is here where he makes mistakes and opens the wrong tent, and is witnessed by the girls who saw a man in a doorway before leaving. Well, I've actually never heard that theory. That actually makes a little bit more sense if he didn't attack them. Because he's running out of time. Also, during this element, maybe it is here... Okay. Girls move to discard location or planned assault location along path and seemingly leaves in a hurry, leaving flashlight and bags, bodies in visible area. One could assume the alarm clock might have, but I don't think the time fits unless his vile act took 4 hours. It does seem like he was scared off to leave the scene as found in the morning. Escapes out of park with ease either way. So in addition to the DNA element and the other prosecution details linking him, flashlight, glasses, etc., I just believe the repeated incidents at Camp Scott point to someone who knows the area very well and either has to or feels totally safe to remain in the area leading up to June 1977. The geographic paths of the incidents, killings, locations point to motivated attack on girls or women, something again in Hart's past, regardless of what you think about case details. My only qualm would be that on the surface, it does seem like a crime that would lend itself to more than one assailant. I also find that there were 2 knots used as indicating 2 or more people, someone in Hart's trust circle that also was obviously criminal-minded. Just my random thoughts from someone who truly hopes one day the truth is revealed. And for some reason, they don't mention the fingerprints that, again, supposedly did not match Hart and then were denied to have even existed. The smaller bloody footprint, which was several sizes too small to be Hart's. So, yeah, a lot of issues here. But a lot of good questions there as well in terms of methodology. Now we're going to go to the major mind shock. Were there critical witnesses who actually saw the perpetrators? So, Kyle J. Wood on his YouTube channel, this is posted November 1st, 2019. So this is a 2003 interview with former Camp Scott counselor Celia Stahl about the night of the murders, 1977. Let's see what I haven't seen this discussed anywhere else. So good on Kyle J. Wood for this interview, and let's hear what Celia Stahl has to say.
Camper there, but if we got there on the day of, we would have unloaded at the staff house, taken all of our stuff to our various units, and then probably would have come back to Great Hall for dinner.
When you testified, you said defense contacted you and you had to go down to the courthouse in
Mays County, I think. Mm-hmm. Yes.
What was the scene like in the courtroom? Was it, it was on the second floor, wasn't it?
I don't remember where it was. I had to drive to Locust Grove, or I don't never remember where I went to. Pryor. Yeah, I drove to Pryor. And
I mean, was it something you weren't not looking forward to doing, or just didn't really care?
No, I wouldn't say I was dreading it. I was curious, probably more than anything, about not ever having been in a murder trial before. Kind of wishing that I hadn't been contacted, because I had to tell all of this stuff that in my own heart I didn't really believe that it had occurred, but I was being asked to repeat what I had said, when in reality I had only reported it because I was supposed to, not because I really thought that had occurred. And I still don't really know that it occurred. But you never know. And if you don't tell it, then if you don't report it to the authorities, then you probably made a grave mistake. So I don't know how much, as I told you last night, I don't know how much validity there is in a first or second grader's statement, and I would be reluctant to try to build a story based on what a first or second grader said. The only thing that made me wonder and think that I probably needed to report it was these girls didn't know that murders had occurred. We didn't tell them. Now, I know some of the older girls found out about it, but these girls shouldn't have known. So when they report that there's a man, it's like, well, I better tell somebody because it really could have been.
But this whole army boots and khaki pants thing, I mean, that must have, I mean, that was, you know, I mean, it must have.
That's what they told me, and that's what I repeated.
But then again.
So, wow, that's really crazy. That's really mind-shocking. So, Celia Stahl is saying that one or more younger girls saw two men in army fatigues. This was before they knew any of the murders took place. They saw them in the woods. So what does everybody make of that? I mean, that's just crazy. And we're going to go even deeper into Mindshock land now, because in the June 27th, 1978 edition of the Oklahoman, there's a write-up here. Witness, former camp counselor Celia Stahl. Several of the camp's counselors were awakened sometime shortly after midnight on the day of the murders by what sounded like the screams of a child, Stahl testified. We investigated, and we found a small girl walking in the densely wooded underbrush, she said. We believe that the child had been sleepwalking. She couldn't remember screaming at all, end quote. Wow. Wow. I mean, why is this not mentioned elsewhere? This seems like an important piece of information. Now, so is this the child that also saw these two men? Or not, because she didn't remember anything at all? I mean, what's going on there? I mean, that's, I don't know what to make of that. That's crazy. So is this the witness, or was this another girl who saw two men in army fatigues? I mean, this is kind of crazy. This is really crazy. Here's a forum post by supposedly Carla Wilt herself. It could be a really noisy place even at night. That night, the rain was dripping off the trees, and so it would be hard to hear other units. Sometimes on a still night, you could hear singing in other units, guitars, loud giggly girls, or screams over bugs, intense or other boisterousness. But never just normal voice level, too many dense trees and space between units. The quietest times would be in the mornings. I'm skeptical that a group of men would have been seen by only children and not by any staff or counselors. I've always thought a lot of the time people are trying to make sense of an experience and feel connected to it. So a flashlight in the night or someone walking to the latrine becomes something more monstrous and or mysterious. Not that people fabricate or lie, it's just trying to understand what they've gone through in the vein of, did the shadow of death hover over me that night too? I know I still can't sleep well at night, knowing someone's hand reached into the crate by the head of my bed and stole my glasses and guitar capo, stole purses from others, wiped bloody hands on my towel, and I had no knowledge because I was asleep. As I've stated before, unless or until someone can access the original case notes and see the real architecture of the case, all that's left is mainly speculation or some credible person until some credible person with information comes forward. Wow. Okay, this is totally mind-shocking. She's saying someone wiped bloody hands on her towel. So stolen purses, stolen glasses, we knew about those. But someone wiped their bloody hands or some kind of blood on her towel. So they went to her tent and wiped that. This is crazy. How much stalking was done that night? So both her and the other counselor, Celia Stahl, are basically skeptical of this girl or girls who reported 2 men. Now, the conspiracy theorists and conspiracy-minded individuals might say, are they covering up for something? Because they're trying, or they're just saying there's nothing to that story, but they reported it. But why would they have reported it in the first place? So, I mean, it doesn't really add up regardless of what you think. It just doesn't make any sense across the board. I don't know what to make of this. This is just a lot of craziness, and then there's also a small girl wandering around sleepwalking. I mean, is that the only night anybody ever sleepwalked? Because if that's the case, I mean, I don't know. That's too coincidental for me. I mean, I don't know. Now, if this particular girl always sleepwalked, okay, we can maybe write that off as a coincidence. But if it's never happened before or after, I mean, that's just weird. Another curiosity is that Celia Stahl supposedly also wrote a book. And supposedly this book is set at Camp Scott, but it's a fictional novel and is something of a romance, according to the author. Now, a lot of people might find that strange. I don't know. I mean, if she had a lot of great memories there, and she doesn't want the evil to overshadow it, perhaps that's all. Perhaps there's nothing really that strange there. But this testimony, there's really, I mean, was this girl and or girls hypnotized, who saw the 2 men to see if they could reveal more details about the men that they cited? Because we do have other persons of interests who were in the military. So, yeah, it's all really, really tough. I mean, this is truly a baffling case, and there's just too many things that don't add up. Too many oddities, too much history with vandalism at the camp. I mean, Gene Leroy Hart himself supposedly has over 200 blood relatives in the area. So, and that's without even considering that the sheriff had it out for him because of his history, his romantic history with his significant other. I mean, it's mind-boggling, mind-shocking, if you will. I mean, the disappearing fingerprints, again, the footprint several sizes too small, and just all these oddities going back years. I mean, these other deaths. I mean, I don't know what to make of this. Another post here in response to some of these other ones that has since been deleted. Perhaps there's some good questions here. I don't personally have the official autopsy report, but it was reported that ejaculate was found on all 3 girls and various other items, including a pillowcase. I'm a female, so maybe I'm missing something here, but it's been my experience that having a guy perform sexually back to back to back is difficult for both of us. And that's under ideal circumstances. Under these circumstances, it's almost impossible to imagine. The girls were not reported gagged, and witnesses reported hearing screams, crying, and someone pleading for their mommy. A counselor went to investigate screams, but saw nothing and went back to sleep. The child who heard someone pleading for their mommy assumed it was homesickness and went back to sleep. This suggests that they weren't gagged, which is another level of comfort with the area the killer showed. He felt confident that he could have easily gotten away if need be, so he wasn't concerned with being silent. Also, if an adult male using a weapon, violence, and evil intent, how hard would you think it is to scare a child into silence? Not very. In a cave a few miles away, known to be utilized as a hideout by Hart, cops found Hart's belongings. Most significantly, they found a newspaper with pages torn out. One of those torn pages was used in the flashlight left at the murder scene, literally on the bodies, to make the flashlight emit only a sliver of light. Something friends and relatives testified Hart did for night hunts. The 2 younger girls were both raped and bludgeoned to death. Doris, the 10-year-old, was sodomized and strangled. All 3 were found strewn along the camp's shower path, zipped into their sleeping bags. Another strange thing, why not just put them back in the tent and zip it up? The girls were found at 6 a.m. Putting them in the tent would have delayed the discovery for at least a few more hours. So why? My opinion, 2 reasons. Shock. This guy has something against the Girl Scouts, those particular counselors, or that particular location. He wanted them found fast, and he wanted fear and horror to explode in that campsite. I'd consider this posing of bodies. Or he ran out of time. Another camper reported someone with a flashlight unzipping their tent and looking in it before hurrying off that very night. No counselors admitted to doing it, so police posit it was the killer engaging a 4th victim. So maybe he left those bodies there simply because he wasn't finished slaughtering little girls. Perhaps he was spooked off by something. This crime screams experience. To choose a campground full of potential witnesses is a risk you only take when you have some level of comfort in your criminal abilities. To choose 3 victims for your first kill, out in the open where anyone walking up to take a piss can see you, my opinion, he's an experienced criminal. Hart was accused and convicted of kidnapping 2 pregnant women and raping one in front of the other. The targeting of the older child cannot be overlooked, but it's hard to say why he targeted her. Some links are difficult to prove because they exist only in the killer's mind, like hair color, size, likeness, opportunity, age. Others are easier, like I was friends with her uncle's wife's brother. The ethnicity theory could fit, and Hart was a rabid pro-Cherokee. Hard to tell, but I think a suspect in theory have to explain the difference in her treatment at the crime scene to be valid. The covered flashlight really confuses me. Here you have a guy taking incredible risk. It's strange to think that this killer was like, I'm gonna kill and rape some girls out in the open without any fear and make a special flashlight to cautiously do it. Makes no sense. What does make sense is either the killer found that flashlight, which was Hart's, who was hiding in the area, and it explains why the fingerprint found on it wasn't Hart's. Or there's more than one killer with no evidence existing. One shoe print, one fingerprint, etc. Or Hart did it and used the flashlight setup he normally did for night hunting out of habit. Now that's curious though, because if this was a more experienced killer, and he possibly knew about the vandalism, which was Hart. Let's say Hart was stalking the campground and a vandal, or not. What if the killer found this stuff in the cave and then brought it to the camp to frame whoever was in the cave? Huh. The flashlight is interesting, being known to be Hart's and placed right on top of the bodies. Seems staged by killer or cops, and that's why Hart walked. Hard to determine what's true and what's belief and what's fantasy when extreme racism is involved. The authorities targeted Hart as the suspect from day one. Why? Because of actual evidence on the scene or a racially induced feeling? This case seems super solvable to me. A fingerprint and DNA from the killer exist. A shoe print. It's interesting to me that more of an effort isn't being done to finally solve this. Hart died in jail. One final note, 2 months before the murders, there was a break-in at a campground. One female counselor's cabin was ransacked, and an effigy of a man was hung up and hanging from a tree outside. Inside, the counselors found a note that warned them that the same person would come back and murder 3 people. The counselors took it as an awful prank. They threw out the note and effigy and didn't report it to police. 2 months later, 3 little girls in that very same campground were slaughtered. Creepy as hell, right? Question mark. Yeah, I mean, is that all coincidental? And then for those that say that story was made up, I mean, that's a clue in and of itself. If someone made up that story, that there was a note left to murder, I mean, why would they do that? I mean, that's got to be, is that to throw off something else? Or are they just, is it really just screwing around? I mean, that doesn't really seem the time or place, but I mean, I don't know. People can be weird. But what does everybody make of these camp counselors and their testimonies? Because originally, when you first read up about the case, it's like, okay, they didn't investigate. But they actually did. One of the counselors actually walked right up to close by to where some of the girls might have actually either been being attacked at that moment and pointed the flashlight in the direction, and then the noises stopped, and didn't actually walk however many yards to discover the crime and perpetrator. I mean, that's just creepy. That's right out of a horror movie. Or the perpetrator was hiding there and hadn't yet begun the attack. I mean, it's all very crazy. I mean, this is truly a very baffling case. Hope you guys enjoyed another edition of Mindshock True Crime. Found it interesting and informative, and keeping up awareness in these old, cold cases. Awareness is how these cases get solved, and of course, breakthroughs in DNA technology. Obviously, planted samples are potentially planted samples. I mean, that's not 100% evidence when there's so much other evidence that points to multiple perpetrators or other perpetrators. So many unaccounted for loose ends. So that, again, this needs to be solved definitively. You can become a member, a YouTube member right here on YouTube. Help support the channel that way, as well as donating to our PayPal. Check the link in the description for the PayPal. And make sure you subscribe to the channel, like and share the podcast, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcast requests. You could also be a guest on the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.